Hi everyone, if you're just joining, thank you for joining us. I'm Tom, editor of LabourList. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join us. So just give us a minute or two. Okay, let's get cracking. I'm Tom, editor of LabourList. Thank you so much for joining. Really brilliant to see so many people with us today. If you don't know LabourList, we are the main dedicated media and events platform for all things to do with Labour. We're a team of journalists. We like Labour, but we're independent of Labour. And do check out our website, our newsletter, if you're interested in hearing more news and analysis about all things Labour. And get in touch if you're keen to do more events with us like this in person, online. I'm also dad of a toddler, so particularly excited to be doing this event and really delighted to be partnering with the Parent-Infant Foundation who've made this possible. If you don't know much about PIF, they are the only UK charity dedicated to supporting the professionals who strengthen relationships between parents and infants. That relationship is obviously an enormous challenge for a lot of parents, new parents, but obviously also critical for children's development. And yeah, clearly everyone here knows that. But the government's role is also clearly central as well. Which is why we're here to discuss what Labour's missions mean for babies. And if you ask anyone, I think, about the defining achievements of the new Labour government, I think a lot of people probably would say Sure Start. I think a really interesting question to explore today is what might be this government's defining achievements in a few years' time, or even when people look back at the government. I think the question is a question about how we support those achievements, those ambitions that they do have, celebrate them, amplify them, and if needed, gently push them towards any other ambitions people here might think they need to be looking at too. So I'm really excited by the panel we've got today. Introduce first Keith Reid, who's the hugely experienced Chief Executive of the Parent-Infant Foundation. He's hugely passionate about supporting the most vulnerable, so fantastic to have you here. Sarah Smith is MP for Hyndburn, new MP whose child was just 4 months old when she was elected last year. Hats off to her, and Opportunity Mission Champion as well. Rosie Wrighting, MP, also delighted to be joined by another new Labour MP, this time for Kettering, and she is a health mission champion for the government. And last but not least, Dr. Lisa Marshall, who I'm going to try and get this in one go, is the Parent-Infant Mental Health and Parent-Infant Mental Health Service Lead for the Mersey Care NHS Building Attachment and Bonds Service. I'll let her do a better job than I have of describing what that entails in practice as we go. Just a bit of boring housekeeping before we start. First thing is, you might have seen, being recorded. It will be made public potentially by PIF following this webinar. Do send questions as we go. I think hopefully, there's a capacity on here for you to send questions. Let me know if you can't. And we will do as best as we possibly can at the end of the session to get as many of those questions in. Final things to the panel, just be grateful if you keep your answers brief, so we've got more time for questions, and I reserve the right to cough if I'm keen for you to speed up the last bit of your answer. That's it from me, so let's get cracking with the first question. This is about the fact that Labour's clearly started as, one of defining things Labour's done is setting out 5 big missions for government and an array of smaller public policies, obviously hanging off those and around those. It'd be really great to hear each of you just set out what you think some of those key missions, priorities, policies are affecting babies. Maybe if we go to Keith first to start us off.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the other panelists for joining today and everyone that's tuned in. So, on paper, the opportunity and health missions and how they relate to babies could be really transformative. And just having them there has meant additional 1 year funding for the highly successful Family Hubs and Start for Life programme. But the real question for me and lots of people that have joined this webinar is, how are those missions going to be translated into real investment and delivery? And the thing is, on the ground, things are pretty stark for many babies. So according to the government's own estimates, 1 in 10 babies in England today are living in fear and confusion and distress. And that's because not everyone bonds easily with their babies, either because of being overwhelmed by trauma in their own childhood or by mental or physical health difficulties. And just to give you a sense the size of that problem, that's about 110,000 babies aged 0 to 2 living in distress. So that's enough babies to fill the Prime Minister's favourite football stadium, the Emirates, twice over. And only a fraction of those babies and families get the help they need from parent-infant relationship teams or services like LISAs. It's only 40 that exist in England. And because the Start for Life programme only has 1 year of funding, there's not going to be any growth really in the year ahead. According to FOI data from the Centre for Young Lives, family hubs, children's centres are looking at cuts to their budgets in the year ahead. And FOI data from the Royal College of Psychs shows that perinatal mental health teams are looking at a similar position. Health visitors, as we know, are historically low. And it feels right now that the government has put boarding up around a really big building site. And the designer images of what's going to appear behind those hoardings could be incredible. But when you look through the gaps, there's just one labourer laying a few bricks on the foundations. And with the loss of NHS England and the teams supporting babies and children, there's a real risk that it could be derailed in the future. So we're all waiting to see what's in the spending review, to see what happens around the Healthy Child, Family Hub, Start for Life programmes, see if they get the investment they need. I'm hopeful, really hopeful it turns out like an episode of Grand Designs. The bank invests the money and what emerges at the end is something really quite amazing, Tom. So that's just contextualising the issue.
Really, really helpful. Thank you, Keith. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. It's great to be with you today. And as you mentioned, it's quite personal for me, not least as well because I actually had my little one before I was elected, and I'm the MP for Hyndburn. But at that point, I had my little one and went through kind of antenatal classes as part of a Start for Life programme in Blackpool, which has some of the greatest levels of deprivation, and really saw was next to some of the mothers that unfortunately probably their babies were going to be born into really complex, challenging circumstances, and recognizing just that huge kind of gulf between, I guess, what I was going to face into versus what they were facing into because of their poverty, because of intergenerational trauma, and how much they are absolutely worthy and need that investment to be able to break some of those cycles. And I've also got some incredible friends who themselves have been trying to break those as adults, having again experienced that poverty growing up. And so there's nothing more important to get right, and it's why it's one of the although within the opportunity mission there is a lot we're trying to achieve with the grounding principle of trying to break down the barriers to opportunity, look at the system as a whole, so that it doesn't matter where you're born, you will have the same opportunities, regardless of which postcode it is that you're born into. But because we know that we continue to live in a country where actually it's a postcode in which you're born which dictates so many of your future life outcomes, and that's not right. It's not morally right, but it's also terrible for our economy because we're not tapping into the huge potential of the vast amounts of our country and the children and young people growing up there. Some of the policies that I think are really positive coming forward, actually you look beyond the opportunity mission itself and look at what we've already brought forward in the Employment Rights Bill. So actually we need to start with antenatal and then postnatal and the right to paternity leave, And unpaid parental leave being available from day one is really important. There's also a campaign listeners and watchers might be aware of, that Dad Shift are leading to really review and look out. We've got some of the lowest levels of paid paternity leave in the EU, and I think there's a really strong argument for why we should be looking at that as well. There is the introduction of new protections so that pregnant women can't be dismissed, and also strengthening day one rights for flexible working, because again, if we're going to meet the needs of young babies and children, that's really, really key in giving parents and families the ability to do the juggle. And I think we've got to look at how we support families the best that we can, and absolutely, for those that end up as single parents, they need sometimes need additional support. But equally, if we can try and support couples in avoiding that kind of breakup often as well, that can help with better outcomes for children. The opportunity mission itself, there is a number of things. So clearly one of the priorities right now is ensuring that we can deliver and hold to the rollout of the provision of early years education entitlement for at least 30 hours from 9 months old, and ensuring and concentrating on the delivery of that and it being a high quality offer, and recognizing the critical role that can play in preparing children for school, which obviously is one of the primary goals of the opportunity mission, which is how do we ensure that we get from where we are today to where we want to get to in terms of 90% of children being school ready when they hit the school system. And every time I go to head teachers and visit my primary schools, we consistently hear of the fact that children are coming in nappies, unable to hold pencils, haven't hit some of those key developmental milestones to be able to thrive and get on with the school system. And so that's really driving. And whilst I'm no better in the know than Keith is around kind of what the outcomes of spending review are going to be, I'm really confident that that is driving the system that we want to build, is making sure we do achieve that core target going forward, and we put in the building blocks that are necessary. But it's a cross departmental objective, which is why it's great to have Rosie here to also speak a little bit more, no doubt, from the health perspective.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really, really interesting take. Rosie, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's great to, as Sarah was just saying, really, it's great to be able to work together on the missions. I mean, the missions were set out to encourage departments to communicate and work together, and that is so important when you're looking at a generation that's been so affected, and babies and their future as well. For the health mission champion, maternity services is something that I've spoken quite a lot about during my time in Parliament, partly because in my constituency I have a hospital where the maternity outcomes, clinical outcomes, were pretty poor. The maternity ward it's been investigated now, has had RAC, and there was a temporary ward set up in the car park where new mothers straight after giving birth were transported with their babies outside to access the temporary ward, and this was the very first moments of the baby's life. That's what, for me, hearing on the doorstep mothers who'd been through that and how it then went on to affect their postnatal mental health and those first few moments with their child, is what got me very interested in talking about maternity services in Parliament. And I've spoken about the need, I presented a 10-minute rule bill and the need for bereavement suites and private suites, so that if your birth does not go to plan or is not as straightforward as they often aren't, that you have a place that's private and comfortable to be able to work through that as well. But it's, yeah, the health mission is critical when we look at the future of babies. And again, in my constituency, unlike other areas in the rest of the country, the demographic is growing at quite a fast rate, but also getting younger. because people are moving from cities to Kettering to start a family, which is fantastic. But it means that the local services, local ICB and local authority have had to adjust and need to adjust what's on offer to make sure that when people do come to Kettering and start their families here, that there's the opportunity for those babies to have the best start in life. And to pick up on what Sarah was saying as well, my constituency is semi-rural, so we have deprived areas next to quite affluent villages, and quite literally you can be 3 minutes down the road and your start in life look very, very different. So sometimes it's not even a postcode lottery, it's just what house on the street that you might be in, or what access to depending on what your school looks like near in your catchment area as well. But the NHS, we started we've gathered information from the 10-year consultation, which is so vital because we're listening not only to the people that work day in, day out in the NHS or services that deal with the NHS, but also to service users as well. And in this circumstance, mothers and fathers so we can learn from people who maybe haven't had the best experience and change the outcome. And after spending review, I'm looking forward to hearing from the Department of Health and Social Care what that 10-year plan looks like. But we're very clear at the moment that with the NHS, for the sake of babies, but also for the sake of everyone, there are some fundamental shifts that we need to make. Firstly, moving healthcare into the communities, and that is really important in order to bridge those inequalities that we see within health as well, particularly for busy parents. They don't always have time to seek the help that they need. Therefore, we need to make sure that we are going to them, and moving healthcare to deprived communities is a really important part of that. Going from analog to digital. I've spoken to healthcare providers in my constituency about this as well, because we're in a modern world now. We have the ability to gather data and use data in order to offer people the services that they need, and we should absolutely be using that so that when a baby is born into a potentially a family where they might need some extra support, that we know that from early on, as soon as the woman is pregnant, so those services can be there to support them. And then also moving healthcare back to prevention, which is what we all want, especially with babies, because those first moments, months, years of your life, there's no redo. And we are seeing the repercussion of lack of support for new mothers and babies now in early years development, as Sarah just spoke about. So prevention when it comes to children and babies is not only the right thing to do, but an absolutely vital part of making sure our next generation is healthy, happy, and able to contribute to our economy. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Not at all. No, some really, really vital changes there, and yeah, admirable summary of all of those. And I really would encourage people actually to check out Rosie's work on that 10-minute rule bill. Also, really, really important bit of work. Lisa, I was too busy worrying about your title. I managed to misspeak on your surname. Actually, Lisa Marsland-Hall. As anyone watching this, hopefully, can probably see.
I can answer to many things. Don't worry. So I'm really excited by Labour's missions and what everyone's sharing here today. And in particular, absolutely the health mission, but the taking back the streets mission and breaking down barriers to opportunity. So really excited by the missions and what they mean for our most vulnerable families who, if we're honest, could get a better offer from our services. So I'm going to really be homing in on the most vulnerable parents and babies today, because that's my world of work. And I would say that Labour's missions are really aligned to the 4 BABS services that I lead across Merseyside. BABS stands for Building Attachment and Bonds Services. And BABS are specialist parent-infant mental health services that Keith was aligning to earlier, that support the most vulnerable parents and babies in the community in a neighbourhood model of care. And often we're delivering support to the most deprived wards in the whole of the UK. So BABS, again, is really focused on supporting the most vulnerable parents and babies in really deprived areas. The services are delivered by Mersey NHS Foundation Trust, but they're a real true partnership with local authorities and community partners, and they're co-located in the family hubs. And the whole focus is giving the most vulnerable babies the best start in life. So everything that Rosie's saying is music to my ears, along with Sarah, because absolutely it's those really vulnerable babies that need that investment more than anybody for the best start in life. And BABS's own mission is around supporting really vulnerable parents and babies to build really good bonds and attachments and break those really negative cycles that we know are tragic for our families and for our babies. And BABS is knitted into all the reforms around children's social care, around putting families first for children and building stable homes built on love. And last but not least, I would say that BABS's ethos, again, why I'm excited, is really reflected in all of Labour's missions. And BABS's ethos is relationships are absolutely everything. You know, everything we do is for our relationships. They inform our happiest or our worst times of our life. But relationships are everything on all levels, on a system level. Our systems have to work really good in partnership, and we have to have good relationships in a service level, services working together in an integrated way for our vulnerable families. But on the ground with families, you know, we have to invest in having really good relationships and engage in our most vulnerable families, because if we don't do that, we're working with broken tools. We have to really build up those relationships with vulnerable families so they can build good relationships with their babies. For me, that is absolutely everything. The next ethos of BABS is we don't believe that vulnerable families are hard to reach and difficult to engage. We believe that services are, and we believe that it's our responsibility as services to really engage the most vulnerable families who don't trust services, don't trust professionals, and they've had a lot of trauma and difficulties in their life where, you know, that they've lost faith in everybody. And I think it's our priority. The best effective models of care services are those that go above and beyond and really, really engage those families, because that's what vulnerable families need. And lastly, the ethos of BABS is that as a partnership, we have to safeguard relationships, mental health, as well as risk. So again, I'm focusing on really vulnerable families here, many who are under children's social care, many who are at risk of removal and separation. And, you know, they're only quite a small group of our population, but they incur the greatest costs to society, to themselves, and to commissioners, and we have to invest in those families. So for me, it's about how we work in partnership with really good integrated models of care to support those families in the best way possible. And that's what kind of we are really, really champions for in BABS. I could talk all day about BABS, but I think families speak the best words around this work. So if it's okay with you, Tom, I'm just going to show a very short video on the BABS services. Again, it's very short, but it hopefully will reflect how BABS is aligned to Labour's missions. Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see if we can get that up. Worth saying, we've got lots of questions coming in, so while this video gets started, do feel free to keep firing in questions. We'll try and get to those at the end.
Thank you.
I had the mindset, because I've been told this from other people, if you let people know how you're feeling or thinking, anything like that, social services will get involved and they'll take your baby off you. And I was petrified of that happening.
Oh, I don't much of the music, so the sounds coming through,
Like,
Tom.
it was horrible. It really was. It was horrible.
I
One
can hear the
fella,
sound myself. I don't know if
the
everyone
other knocked
attending
me
can hear.
out.
Maybe
The
send
other
us a
stabbed me in the eye,
message.
shot me in the leg, and I think, you know what, when you stop, you think, kick myself for letting them win. And then I had him and I thought, well, no.
We referred to social care originally because my mental health was at its worst possible point. The children were seeing things that they shouldn't have been seeing and shouldn't have been witnessing.
A lot of my anxiety was that I wasn't going to be there for the girls, because things were that bad that I thought it was going to end up where like we'd split up or I wouldn't see them, and it affected me massively because I obviously like every day I thought this is going to be the last time that I'll be staying in the house with them, that I'll be able to wake up with them in the morning, because I just didn't know what was going to happen next in the relationship. I was in a really bad place, like really dark place.
It's just been great to know that people are on your side and helping you to deal with problems in your past, not judging you for your problems in your past.
I think the biggest thing that BABS has brought is an alternative for families. It removes that shame that families feel for being in tricky circumstances, and it gives them a light at the end of the tunnel.
As a social worker, our primary goal is for a child to stay with their parents, and the support that BABS offers in building up that attachment and building up that bond, that then helps them work towards the goals that we maybe as professionals are putting in place.
I was really benefited so much by not just BABS, but by social services as well. You know, it helped me just think, oh, actually, I'm doing all right as a mum here, that I bring a lot of joy to my baby. And I was quite proud of that, really.
When supporting vulnerable families, we're often very focused on safeguarding risk. But sometimes we lose sight that we can't safeguard risk unless we safeguard the parent-infant relationship and parent-infant mental health. They both go hand in hand.
I've yet to meet a parent who doesn't want the very, very best for their own child.
I'm a brilliant mum, yeah. I didn't think I'd be able to do so good.
If I didn't have this help, then I wouldn't be the mum that I am now. I'd be different. Life would be different.
It's a value change as well as a practice change, and something that would ensure that children stayed more often than not with their families.
I'm just so proud and happy that they're mine. I wouldn't want my life any other way. And learning that not everyone's perfect, and I'm still a human, I'm still a great mum, I'm still a great partner, and BABS has helped me to realise that.
Apologies, I think the background sound went off there, but hopefully it still came through.
No, a few people messaged saying they could hear that, so fingers crossed that was fine for most attendees. Thank you so much, Lisa. Really, really powerful comments and powerful video as well. Really pleased we could share that. Should we focus on the opportunity mission a little bit? I think it set a new milestone. 75% of 5-year-olds should reach a good level of development in the early years foundation stage assessment by 2028. We just was keen to hear what you think needs to happen during the early years or even during pregnancy to improve child development and try and hit that milestone. I don't know if you want to take that one first, Keith.
Thanks, Tom. And just to build on Lisa's video and the points that she's made, what it requires is making sure that every single policy that relates to babies explicitly recognise that these earliest relationships and the environment they experience from the very beginning, even before birth, is one of the most fundamental things that needs to be looked at, addressed and supported. And that means supporting parents to be good enough, not just at meeting their baby's physical needs, but their emotional and developmental needs. And the reasons behind that, which many on this webinar will already know, is that by the age of 2, a baby's brain has grown to 80% of its adult size. And each second during this period, it's making 1 million neural connections. So this is like building the foundations of a house on which everything else is layered up on. And it underpins the health, the well-being, the learning, the behaviour throughout childhood and into later life. And what does that look like practically? It means during pregnancy, antenatally and postnatally, we support parents' emotional and mental health and their physical health, but we also do the same for babies. In the early months, it means we need a stronger health visiting service, one that routinely visits people in the home, builds trust, delivers support, and identifies challenges. And we need a welcoming space in every community, like family hubs, where parents can go, they can learn, they can connect, and they get help where needed, and more services like leases. And we recently commissioned a review of the Millennium Cohort data, and it's published next week. And it shows, again, building on existing evidence, links between parent-child relationships and outcomes like emotional development, speech and language, even potty training. And it's the latest study to show that actually there's a real value in investing in supporting those early relationships. And we know it saves government money too by preventing more costly interventions further down the line. And for me, how I judge the success of these missions is how it helps babies. Babies, and I'll give you an example, like Danny, whose mum was referred by social care, by their health visitor, about their relationship. And luckily for them, for mum and for Danny, there was a team nearby. And this is what mum said about her experience of being supported by that specialist team. Danny is more relaxed. I'm more relaxed. I feel like I'm a good person. I'm happier. So he's happier. Before I didn't know him and I left him to his own devices. But now we play together. Everything has come alive in the house and we've changed together. And I've accepted I need to invest in myself. And I'm proud of myself. Danny has something to hold on to. I'm proud to be his mum, proud of the relationship we have. I'm putting effort into both of us because I don't want him to lose me. That's how I'm going to judge it. How many babies like Danny are supported?
Thank you, Keith. Sarah, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, and just to say, there's a longer version of Lisa's video as well, I think, that is worth a watch, and I'm hoping will be circulated to everybody. It's, you know, brought tears to my eyes watching it. It's so powerful, and it's important that we tell these stories and ground all of this in the reality of, like, the transformation the right policy decisions, the right investment can make. There's nothing harder that anyone that's ever become a parent, I'm sure, would all say the same. Nothing harder than becoming a parent. And I can say that having also come into a pretty difficult job, I would say, at the same time. But hands up, the first 3 months working out how I became, you know, a good mother to my little boy. And I had all of I had all the advantages. I had everything to help me on that journey. But I had very difficult moments with it. And so recognizing just like, yeah, how much greater those challenges are if you don't have a community, if you don't have family, if you haven't had the lived experience of seeing it modeled, if you then feel scared about going into a conversation with a professional with a uniform on because of your previous experiences around that, and then that fear that was expressed in that video around, like, worried of that ultimate threat of, like, the child being taken away from you. And so it, you know, it really takes, like, holistic culture and system change to turn that around, because we know the worst outcomes for our children, unfortunately, are those in care and those that end up in the care system. And so we have to fight and do everything that we can to prevent that and support. And that's some of the early things the government did announce, tackling, putting greater investment into foster caring, and supporting different models for the children that really can't be sustained within their, you know, within their initial primary family, if you like. But, you know, equally looking at the types of intervention that Lisa's talking around, where you can prevent that breakdown and you can get in and help parents to understand what parenting requires, and you can tackle mental health, which is incredibly precarious both for mums and new dads. And often we don't talk about dads in that in this discussion, but it's really important that we do. And I do think, you know, there was, and I can already see some questions being raised around kind of how we make sure that parents do obviously recognise the responsibility they do have for their children, and making sure that they are school ready if we're going to hit that 75% target, which we absolutely should be, and it's the right area to be prioritising. But for example, possibly another area that doesn't get spoken about enough is around phones and technology, and how parents now assess risk, and thinking that their child is safer on a phone, or it's tidier and there's less mess to have to deal with if you put them on the phone rather than if you get out some messy play or take them to the park and put them in the sand pit. Like there's some real kind of fundamentals that we need to be communicating and educating people who are going to be parents and new parents around, because I find it's genuinely to lack the physical literacy by the time you get to school to be able to like hold a pencil and write, like it takes quite a lot of lack of opportunity for that child to not achieve that, and yet far too many children, that is the story that is true for them. And so there is that balance between like responsibility and supporting families, but also making sure that parents recognize it's not for the school and the nursery to potty train your child. Like we will give you the tools, but that is your responsibility as a parent. And I think there's a delicate balance to get here. I've spoken a little bit already, I think, about some of the things that we're doing, but certainly taking head on the challenges of the children's care sector, and it's wrong that people profit from that. It was one of the reasons I first got involved in politics when that was being brought in and it was being freed up to the market. I just thought, how on earth can we ever justify profit out of our most vulnerable children? And so I'm so proud that we are going to take that on. It's not an overnight fix, but the right starting points are being made there. And then how we get it right to try and prevent the children going in the first place is absolutely, has to be top of the agenda, really.
Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, one of the big legacies, as I say, or defining achievements of New Labour was Sure Start. One thing that I think people might not necessarily know a huge amount of, publicly at least, maybe a lot of specialists do, is the Start for Life programme. And I think I'm right in saying there was a question mark when Labour came in. It was a previous government programme, whether that was going to be continued. I think I'm also right in saying that funding has been extended. Is there anything more you want to say about that?
I mean, I think firstly that, we do live in a different fiscal environment than the last Labour government. These are, some of the big challenges. I know, we all want, there's constant calls for the return of Sure Start, and the evidence is really, really clear there. But I think, the Family Hub and Start for Life are looking at models of delivering, a lot of the elements that Sure Start was set up to do, and that multidisciplinary approach to working within communities and being a really kind of welcoming space. Clearly, we're all waiting for the kind of outcome of the spending review and what the longer term plans are. But as Labour have been consistent on so many areas, like we are trying to move away from short-term intervention and services not being sure of their longer-term future, because that's also really important. Relationships, change happens at the speed of trust, I like to say, and that only happens if those trusted relationships are able to develop. And so there's nothing worse for these communities that have often experienced, these families that have experienced trauma and been let down by service after service, if you're ripping something away when it's just getting started. So I just really welcome and look forward with, bit of a level of optimism that we are trying to move beyond that. But being new into government, there always is some time that's needed to calibrate things, work out what the real financial situation is, and make the right kind of commitments, because equally our priority around economic growth and getting more money into people's pockets is really important to these families as well. And so it's looking at all the bits of the broader system in order to make sure that we do the best for these babies. But I will just say as well, really important element of the Start for Life and the priority is early identification of additional needs, and particularly, if we can get the right speech, language and communication type interventions in, a lot of children, that might be a small challenge that they face that they can leave behind if the intervention is there at the right time. Like, they can get up to speed, they can understand how to manage either their challenge, or it is just a bit of a learning and catch up. And so that's also been a really key priority as well, looking at the future plans.
Thank you, Sarah. I am keen we move on to health. Labour's health mission, one of the ambitions there is to raise the healthiest generation of children ever. There's obviously big changes happening in the NHS more widely. You're seeing obviously changes to NHS England, to integrated care boards, a new 10-year plan in the works. I guess I'm keen to hear a bit more, maybe Rosie, on what needs to be in that plan to support vulnerable babies, and maybe you're talking about the need for prevention, for kind of having that shift towards a more preventative service.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try not to repeat too much because the things I touched on in the previous question. But like same as what Sarah said, like we are waiting for the spending review. The physical environment is not what it was under the last Labour government. But saying that, what we saw in the budget is that health is absolutely being prioritised, and rightly so as well. I know that, Tom, you mentioned that people and this happens on a doorstep, people do talk about Sure Start quite a lot when they think about what Labour delivered previously, but they also talk about the NHS. And we've seen, and I had local elections in my constituency, and I was door knocking quite a lot, and very consistently, no matter what party people are voting for now, they do relate Labour governments to the NHS and to fixing the NHS. And that is why it's absolutely vital that we put the money into this and the capital into it, which we have been doing, so people can see a tangible difference in their access to healthcare. And the decisions that we've already made have been making an impact on with that, especially with access to appointments. And I've seen that in my own inbox as well. And that's why when I spoke about maternity services, that's a really clear example of where, yes, there's so much that we need to do, but the fundamentals of people being able to trust that they can have their babies be safe, comfortable, and have the best outcome possible. And at the moment, maternity services are a postcode lottery, and we see massive inequalities in maternity services, particularly with ethnic minority groups as well. Maternal mortality rates is 12.8 deaths per 100,000 women given birth in the UK, and for Asian women that's 16.7 and 28.2 for Black women. So there is massive inequalities in maternity services right now, and the way that we change that is by putting that capital into the front line of the NHS to make sure that we are delivering for people. And that's why we've made the decisions we've made around abolishing NHS England, changes to local ICBs, and getting that capital in the front line so people can trust that when they go into hospital, whether they're pregnant or with their baby, that they're going to get the care that they need, and they're going to be able to see a doctor. And I know I touched on previously, one of the key things is prevention, moving the NHS to a place where we're not just treating people when they're sick, but actually working with people when they're well so they don't become sick. And I think that's important across all age groups, but it's so important with new mothers and babies, because you don't get that time back. And the way, and it's hard because we know as a government we need to do that while addressing the backlogs and the problem with urgent care as well. And that is why we've made tough decisions so that we can put that money into making sure it's getting the NHS to a place where we are treating people not just when they're desperate, but before then. And there's a lot to do. I think that probably everyone in this call will be eagerly waiting to hear from the spending review, and then hopefully shortly after the 10-year plan. But what I am confident is this government knows the importance politically, but also to show people that we are going to deliver in getting the NHS back on its feet.
Thank you so much, Rosie. We will get to questions, I promise. But Lisa, is there anything brief you want to say on that one?
Yeah, no, I think just, yeah, again, it's great to hear everyone talk. And I'm sorry, Sarah, for putting you off speaking, because I just was putting thumbs up to loads of things that you were saying. And I think for me, in terms of how we can absolutely raise our healthiest generation of children yet, absolutely is we have to focus on our most vulnerable at-risk children. And I've gone through some of the questions, and I know Liz and other people who've joined the webinar today have talked about, but actually we have to focus earlier, we have to focus universal and targeted. And I 100% agree, Liz, but I think it is those vulnerable at risk families who are at risk of separation removal. And I think, I think bravely and rightly, Sarah, you reflected on that the care system isn't the answer for many of our children. There'll always be a small pocket of children who need care and who have to go into care, absolutely. But there's a huge number of children that we can prevent going into care with the right support at the right time. And Chris, somebody else who's a paediatrician on the webinar, has also reflected on, actually, if we need to do a lot of work and focus on poverty and deprivation, and really supporting our most vulnerable at-risk families to have really good models of care. I'm a real believer in integrated healthcare models for our most vulnerable families, because we can't work separately, we can't work in silo, we've got to combine our resources. And just lastly, I just want to reflect on what Sarah talked about. I think there is a massive need to change culture and thinking in systems around vulnerable families. And so, I think BAB services, we're specialist mental health services, we offer all this amazing therapy, but actually what builds the bonds and breaks the cycles is the important basic stuff. And I think Sarah reflected on her difficulties, and personally, a mum myself, and as a mum of 4 children myself, the reason why I set up BABS 10 years ago was because no one ever tells you how vulnerable you're going to be with your mental health and your relationships after having a baby. No one ever tells you the red book, the maternity file. No one ever explains that this is the most challenging, difficult time in your life, whether you've got support or partners or whatever. And actually, no one ever tells you, it's like the biggest secret when you become a parent, that your own past parenting experience and your own attachments, and if you've had it really tough, your own trauma, adverse childhood experiences all come and haunt you when you have your own children. So that's really difficult for lots of us who may have ghosts from the past. But for our most vulnerable families who live, in terrible housing conditions, who live in poverty, who don't get sometimes the right support at the right time, who are disadvantaged and marginalised, it's absolute set up to fail for those families. And I think we as a government, as a system, as services, absolutely have got to offer more integrated best practice models for vulnerable families. We have to intervene earlier, but specialists, we have to pump in that funding. It's been great, Rosie, hearing you talk about the spending review, because the spending review of the past 10 years has evidence that there's been a massive reduction in early intervention prevention for our most vulnerable families. And there's a massive increase in investing in reactive late intervention. And I think, I am really excited by Labour's missions, because I think for a long time it's really spoke volumes to the work that we do in BABS. And I absolutely think we can support vulnerable families to build bonds and break cycles together. And anything I can do, to support yourself, Rosie, or Sarah, in any of your kind of missions around this, it's really great stuff. But I think, it really takes that investment. So yeah, really excited. But I think absolutely raising a healthier generation of children starts with our babies of today are our parents of tomorrow, and we all know that the cycles continue. But I'm absolutely committed to breaking those cycles. So thanks for having me today, Tom. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Really appreciated. Let's get some questions. There's one question here from Alexandra Galvin, making the point that one policy challenge is that babies obviously can't speak for themselves easily, at least, can't vote to shape policy. And Alexandra asks how we can better embed the voice, the lived experience of infants actually in early years policy and practice, particularly in safeguarding context. Keith, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are lots of professionals working with babies that are beginning to try and work out how to bring the baby's voice into the room when considering what those services look like. If they could speak, what would they say? What would it look like? But also what happens to them as well. And we're really delighted that the Foundation, the National Lottery, has just awarded us 4-year funding to help create a national parent-infant relationship framework that will join up all services working with babies around relationships. And a key part of that is working through and creating tools for professionals, policymakers, and services to lift how they can do that easily and what that looks like in terms of bringing the baby into the room when these decisions are being made.
Thank you, Keith, and admirably brief as well. A couple of questions here on baby development. Keith Aubrey asks about whether we need a kind of comprehensive outcome framework where we measure progress for all babies in the first 1,000 days. And I was going to say it for someone else, also from Keith, about whether we create some kind of single website or app for babies' development, and how, you know, information's in lots of different places. I've certainly seen that myself. Is that something anyone's keen to take?
And help with an outcomes framework from someone with a brilliant name called Keith. Under the last government, there was work to measure what's really important in terms for babies and how to create an outcomes framework. Lots of that work's already been done. Elaine Fulton, who's helped lead on this, he's creating outcome frameworks for family hubs and what it looks like for babies too. So there's a lot of work out there. It's ready to go almost. It'd be a case of the government adopting and implementing, really. It makes perfect sense for all of us to understand what's important and what to look at. And in terms of universal offers, yes, there should be. There should be something that sets out to parents just what good enough looks like, what they're able to do to bring out their strengths, alongside targeted and specialist interventions that we've focused on today as well. You know, I'm going to hop back to Sure Start, but one of the crowning achievements, shining achievements of Sure Start was for parents to go, all right, I'll learn to be a better parent. It's okay. It's okay to say, this is hard, I need some help. You know, we need to get back to there as well, because all of us struggle. All of us need some help at some point, whether it's with parenting or other challenges in our lives.
Okay, there's a question from Tamora talking about the number of policies coming out that are about GP services, hospital services, not necessarily quite as much, Tamora says, about babies and children's services. So Tamora asks how the NHS plans going to support the vulnerable babies that Keith's been talking about after they're sent home from hospital, after they've been discharged from maternity services. Is that one you want to take, Rosie?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's a really good question, and basically putting the case for why we needed missions so badly from this government, because you're right, the way it's kind of feels like it's probably previously worked before is a mother gets handed from, you know, the hospital, and then she deals with the local authority, and there's no one. It doesn't always feel like we have an approach that understands, okay, when we're taking a new mother through those different services and her experience, how can we make it better and work cross-departmental as well. And we know that when we look at developments of babies, but also the mental health of mothers, things like housing, the community support around them, their mental health, their financial situation, it all impacts those first couple of years of the newborn's life, but also of the how the mother is coping. And that is why it's so important that we have a government that is clear that we need to departments and ministers need to communicate with each other on issues like this as well. And in terms of the announcements around doctors and hospitals, there has been quite a lot, as I spoke about before, in the budget. The NHS and Wes's team was given a massive chunk of the money that was raised through making decisions like raising national insurance, because unless we get those waiting lists down, unless we get those that access to GP appointments, the other stuff becomes harder to do because it all has a knock-on effect. But yeah, it's a really good question, and basically making the case for why we know that we need to work across departments to achieve these missions and deliver for mothers and babies.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And maybe just one quick final one for you about breastfeeding. A few people asking what Labour's doing or going to do on supporting breastfeeding.
Yeah, I've heard it spoken about actually by, I think Sarah might, I don't know if she'll agree with me, but often I think that in Parliament we almost expect, especially when it comes to women's issues, that it has to be the women who've been through situations to raise it in Parliament. But I have heard it from women and mothers on the PLP who've discussed struggling with breastfeeding and how it affected their mental health, but also that there wasn't necessarily the support around them at the beginning. I think that's vital for breastfeeding, but I think that is around that you could talk about so many different issues and how there isn't necessarily the support at the beginning. I think that's a really important part of moving healthcare to the community, so that people feel like there's and I know that this was Sure Start did this, and in my constituency I have Home Start that do incredible work as well, but that if you don't have that immediate support system around you, that there is somewhere you can go to get maybe more of a overarching advice or be signposted to the right place. And yeah, because we know the impacts of not having that around breastfeeding and what it can do. But it's a really good point, and actually I'll ask the department as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Rosie. I know you've got to shoot for another meeting in 2, so feel free to drop off now. Really, really appreciated.
Thank you.
I think Sarah might have time for one more question or two. What was the first one I was going to ask? Just on, school readiness. Quite a few people talking about school readiness, and what Labour's doing there generally to support school readiness. But also, someone said a child could be at school holding a pencil fine age 5, but yet feel unloved and often dysregulated inside with no one they feel they can go to for help. How do we maintain the focus on things like not just pencil holding, but on the foundation for everything, relationships? And maybe just secondly, lots of questions about child poverty, what Labour's doing there, and how foundational that is to a lot of these issues. If there's anything you want to touch on poverty more generally, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thanks. And I think on the point around school readiness, I think it's quite hard to see how a child turns up sort of, if you like, ticking the final boxes of what school readiness gets defined as, if some of those more foundational points around the loving relationships and good interactions with their parents or other of their primary caregivers sort of like haven't been put in place. And I'm sure that there are exceptions to that, but I think often, unfortunately, the two things come hand in hand. And I think what's really important is clearly the approach of your midwife and of your health visitor and of all of the sort of ante and postnatal support is 100% around those that importance of that relationship and that bond between parent and baby, and the significance of that in a baby building its initial kind of building blocks within its brain, and that certainly in your like good and high quality early years education providers, it continues to be the focus is, it's that before the other bits, whether that's about getting enough physical space or exercise every day. For a baby, I don't mean exercise in the way that we might frame it for children and adults, but making sure your baby does have the opportunity to do some crawling and some climbing and do all those sorts of things, and encouraging parents to allow their children, their babies, to understand what to take risks and to problem solve and to work out how they communicate with other children and with other adults. So I would argue that really on the school readiness, it's both and if you're doing the foundational stuff about how parents are interacting with their babies and their young children, they will naturally, I think, be able to then achieve like the pencil holding piece or the potty training and moving or the dressing themselves, because parents will be interacting in a way to encourage those behaviours anyway. On the questions that maybe have been focused around child poverty, what's really important, and obviously what we're all, again, waiting with anticipation to hear about, is the child poverty strategy, which the government are bringing forward reasonably imminently, we are all being told. And there's been, significant consultation and contributions. I'm sure many on the call have themselves as well been to either roundtables or somehow contributed to that. There is absolutely, absolute priority and emphasis being done to this, that the big lever is absolutely raising children and their families out of poverty and looking at all the ways that we do that. Another terrifying statistic that is just heartbreaking is that 71 children died between 2019 and 2024 in this country because they were in temporary accommodation, and that contributed to their death. Like, it is utterly shameful and unacceptable that is where we are. But again, it's where tackling this goes even beyond the opportunity mission. So the whole point of mission-led government is bringing together the different departments in order to break down those silos and look at where the things interact that achieve your objectives. But even, for example, on improving outcomes and school readiness, it goes right from the housing objective and making sure there's enough affordable housing through to the economic growth piece and getting more money into people's pockets, and then obviously into the hows and whats of education, early years, health, so it's so broad ranging. And unfortunately, we have inherited a situation where we don't look at anything that is working. And so the challenge for our ministers and for our government is so significant, trying to write all those things as quickly as we can. But that is our mission, and that is the overall driving reason, I guess, that we're all involved in politics, and that everyone does the job of being part of Labour Party and trying to drive that transformation that we need.
Indeed, and a good point to end on. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to all our speakers. Hugely generous giving up your time. So I thought some really good insights and whistle-stop tour through quite a lot of different topics. Thank you so much to everyone else for coming. Great to see so many people here, and also for sending so many questions. A lot of more detailed questions as well we didn't get the chance to go into. I think all of our details are online, so do feel free to email participants if you're keen to follow up with questions. A big thank you to PIF for sponsoring this, Parent-Infant Foundation, and finally to my colleague Ellie Ormsby, who's been beavering away behind the scenes making this happen, and couldn't have done it without you. So a big thank you, Ellie. And just finally, one more as well, to those people who donated beforehand, either to LabourList or the Parent-Infant Foundation. We're a small organisation, events cost us money, quality journalism costs us even more. So if you can support what we do as a small non-profit, reporting on all things Labour, that really does help. Please do that. Do subscribe on our website, check out our daily newsletter, and please do support Parent-Infant Foundation as well. They're also keen, not just for individual donations, but there's kind of corporate donation sponsorship possibilities, pro bono support that might be helpful, fundraising challenges, always looking for more help. And they're also campaigning on leading the first 1,000 days movement, a really important campaign. And we're keen that I flag next month is we've got Infant Mental Health Awareness Week. I think that's it from me. I was hoping to get a chance for all the speakers to give a final couple of minutes, but we're a few minutes over now, so I shall leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully see you on the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.